Justin and I collaborated on two books. One was called The Language of Names, which was about naming practices, mostly in the U.S. And then we were both between projects, and I was convinced that we should write a double memoir. He was very reluctant at first, but a mutual friend of ours persuaded him that it would be a good idea. So we did. We embarked on this double memoir. He grew up on the west side of New York, and I grew up on the east side. Our childhoods couldn't have been more different. He was an orphan by the time he was 13, and I had very domineering parents and a father who sort of sucked all the confidence out of me, if I ever had any, and a very, very repressed mother. And we had plenty of money. His father was a shirt manufacturer, and he did very well. So there was plenty of money. He also grew up in a kosher household and went to shul every Saturday. And as soon as he got home from shul, he said he would go into his bedroom and switch the lights on and off and on and off and on and off because it was forbidden. So we were both rebels, but the kind of rebel that doesn't give their parents any trouble. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's all up here, which I think probably is the safest kind of rebellion. I lived a kind of wild life after I started at Barnard in 1950, and spent a lot of time in the village and had a notorious boyfriend for 2 years. But then I met Justin, and we got married in 1954, and we moved into his little apartment on 37th Street near the East Side Airlines terminal, which doesn't exist anymore. And his apartment could have fit into the front hall of the house that my parents then lived in. It was so tiny. But he knew a lot of people in the art world. Art and music. He worked for Harry Abrams, which was probably the best American publisher of art books. He was an editor. One of the funny things about it was that he would be sent down to Philadelphia to look at the proof sheets of reproductions for the art books, and he said he was partly colorblind, so they were sending down somebody who couldn't really tell blue from green. Anyway, when it came time for us to write this book, which was in the 80s, I guess, or 90s, I think, it seemed very easy, and we talked about, well, what if we disagree, and that sort of thing. And I said, I would like you to be the captain of this ship, because I don't mind taking directions, and somebody has to make final decisions if there's conflict. But as it turned out, we each had our own, we alternated chapters. He was 5 years older than me, so of course it didn't jibe exactly, but we did have the same kind of experience in New York as single people and then as a couple. And I must say we hung out with a lot of very famous people. I mean, I could tick them off, but I won't. And it was sort of heady. And then we decided to move to Cambridge because he had a contract from Simon & Schuster to write a biography of Mark Twain, and he had never written a whole book before, although he had edited several books. And he worked for 7 years on this book, and when he was finished, I hadn't read a single word. He wouldn't show me a word. It won both the Pulitzer Prize and the National Book Award, and he said to me much later, He said, I always knew it would win the Pulitzer Prize. This man was probably the most modest person I've ever known. He never talked about himself. In fact, maybe that was one of his flaws, that he wouldn't talk about himself. So when we first got married, I had to teach him how to fight, because he didn't like confrontation. And I said, if you keep it in, it's just going to fester like some kind of horrible infection. So you've got to talk about it. And it took a while, but he learned. So we never had any. We had a few little spats, but in 60 years we never had a major fight. Never. And the worst thing he ever called me was creep.